Okay, I wanted to do a serious video based on the comedy that Chris posted last night. This is how you really tell what's going on with a piston. Okay, this is a stock S54 piston that we pulled out of a 60,000 mile car that we broke on nitrous. We were hitting 150 shot on top of the 11.5 to 1 factory components with 20 pounds of boost at 3,000 RPM out of the hole, and we cracked the brow of the piston. And you can see right here where the damage started. You see how thin the crown of the piston is right there at the valve relief. That cracked. Once that cracked, it was just a torch. It took everything out. But notice how well the rings survived right here. Okay, they still got melted away, but there's alloy all around taken out where the ring is still intact. It shows you the piston is much softer than the ring is. Okay, and now these pistons aren't near as strong as what we're running in the built engines, but the rings are a lot stronger now too. Okay, now this piston over here, you can see this one started to go, and this is a really good example because you can see where the aluminum was depositing by the ring. The ring's still intact, still moves around, everything's fine because the ring's a lot harder. Okay, you can even see where the aluminum started to melt around the ring. Okay, this is a really good example of what things look like when things get hot. Nitrous tends to do that. If you have any problem, any mixture problem, you're running a little too lean or a little too much timing or a little too much compression for the amount of cylinder pressure that you're generating at a slower engine speed, this kind of thing happens. But if you look at the top of the piston, there's no signs of detonation anywhere. Even these parts of the crowns of piston are still sharp, nice and sharp. They aren't worn, they aren't melted. Everything's good. 60,000 mile piston. You look at Marcus's pistons, they're all carbon black from oiling. Oil deteriorates the octane level and causes detonation, but that's still not what happened there. You'll notice on his, the damage occurred around the second ringland, meaning this ring right here, with all the scuffing, it bound and it exploded, breaking the ringland. None of that's occurring here. Okay, this is a really good example on what things should look like if they were just on the borderline and went bad. And I promise you, we were leaning on this engine significantly harder than we leaned on Marcus's. We knew it was going to break. We didn't care. Okay, that's a really good example. All the side of the pistons are good. BMW factory clearances, which are tight, but we still got away with it just fine because the tune was good. Okay, we just leaned on it too hard with nitrous, made too much power, cracked the piston. All right, all these pistons, they look great. They're all the same color. No carbon fouling on any of them. Nice, clean, good, healthy running engine. Just not strong enough components, and we're being a little bit too abusive with it, knowing that the components would probably fail. All right, Saad, this is an 1800 horsepower race motor that we got, right?
Yeah, this is out of the Silver Supra.
Okay, it's clearly been run. Problem with this engine was
It had a rod failure. This engine uses, as I can show you, aluminum rods. So it had a rod failure, and essentially when the neck of the rod broke away from the piston, it slapped around and then put a hole in two sides of the block. Actually, this block is actually still good. We will weld plates back onto here, repair the crankshaft, and get this guy back out and running again. And if you look at it, if you look at the cylinders, even though that rod broke, that cylinder is still in almost perfect condition.
oh yeah, yeah, you can still see the crosshatch on it. It's
Okay.
good. Yep.
So, in this example, this is an engine that made 1800 horsepower on gasoline.
Nitrous and boost, right?
Oh yeah, out of a 91 millimeter turbocharger. So, and it run on gasoline, not ethanol. And in this example, yep. You see, and this has had some oil sitting on it. When I pulled the cylinder head off, I still haven't cleaned this up. This is in a disassembly mode, obviously not a reassembly mode, so the block's a little bit dirty. But in this example, what I'd like to show is proper piston or wall clearance. And mind you, this is on a quote-unquote loose race motor. So obviously you're going to get a lot more expansion in an engine that's going to make 1800 horsepower as opposed to an engine that's making,
and we're spinning this, what, 9,500 RPM?
Yeah, minimum. When I pull the gears at about 95, but sometimes if the clutch goes in, it might see 10 too.
Yep.
But so it's seen a lot of RPM. Absolutely, a lot of RPM. Now, what I want to show here is rocking of the piston and bore, which is normal. You're going to get some rock. Here it is rocking.
Yeah, you can't even hear the piston hitting the cylinder wall.
No, the piston should never hit the cylinder wall. You're going to get some rock, but if the piston is held square in the bore, if you got the proper piston to wall clearance, that allows the rings to hold the piston square in the bore, and then it stops the piston from ever touching the wall. Now, you're going to hear the movement, but I'll be quiet here in a second. Okay.
Of course, get a phone call. All right, it'll stop in a second. That's all right. I'll edit it out. No big deal.
Okay, so
All right, so yeah, so we're back to the piston thing.
okay, so what I want to give an example of here is proper piston to wall clearance. If you have proper piston to wall clearance, and that will allow the rings to square the piston in a bore properly, so as the piston, when it rocks, and a piston will rock, but it will not touch the cylinder walls. So I'm going to be quiet here so that you can hear it, and I'm going to start to rock it. So you can hear that the piston is moving, but the rings, and you hear the kind of the oil on the rings and with the pistons and stuff like that, and it's not hitting the wall. And this is a quote-unquote loose race engine that makes 1,800 horsepower. An engine that makes 800 horsepower can even be built tighter, so for a lot better oil control. And this engine had no oil consumption issues at all. And if built properly, this is the type of result that you'll get.
And these are the same Wiseco pistons, same kind of forging that we find in the built M3s. So material, everything else being the same, clearances could even be tighter for a street motor.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you order a heavy-duty Wiseco piston, that design came from our engines because we developed it with Brian Nutter inside Wiseco.
Right. All right, so let's ask the engine builder what he thinks. Oh, wait, we just did.
Right, and that's an important thing. In this case, the engine builder is me, and the tuner was you. Jason Siebels did tune this engine, and you can see that if there was ever an issue between the engine builder and the tuner, which a lot of people are making reference to, it's being handled right here.
So as a tuner, what I can tell by looking at these, because this thing did make several passes at a lot of power, as you can clearly see here, these edges, which are really thin, okay, I'm trying to get a good shot of that, they're very thin. If this was to overheat in a manner that would cause damage, the first thing to go would either be the spark plug or the brows of these pistons where these valve releases are.
Exactly. These eyebrows are very thin aluminum, and they would quickly disintegrate if there was any issue. Right there, and you can see that fine edge right there is still intact.
Yeah, and you know, this was a concern when we started running these pistons, but so far we haven't had any problems because, you know, we obviously at 1,800 horsepower we lean on it pretty hard. But you can clearly see that there's none of that going on, which is what we saw in the video of Marcus's engine. All the corners were and the edges were straight and flat with no issue at all. So, you know, there's no signs of detonation, you know, and at 1,800 horsepower, you know, I think we got a pretty good handle on an 800 horsepower car.
Yeah, and in that other example too, if you were to look at the head gasket and sealing area in it, you really couldn't see anything either. So detonation is going to tax those areas first: tops of the piston, spark plugs, head gaskets, the valves. It's not going to start with an attack at the second ringland.
Right. Now, all things we've seen before. Now, if I were to ask you, what's the piston to wall clearance of this cylinder? Can you tell me that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Why is that?
Because as the engine builder, I have a blueprint sheet on it, and I measure the bore, and I measure the piston. I obviously subtract the two, and when I send this down, when I sent this one down to the machine shop, I tell them exactly what I want from them, and then I give them the exact bore number to give. They have to come within a certain tolerance that I prescribe. I document it, and then I install it.
Now, what's the importance of having a blueprint sheet? So 6 months later, if this engine comes apart, what does that help with?
Well, it helps a lot. So that's how you learn what works and what doesn't. So if you have if you have a certain amount of clearance and you found any kind of contact, or let's say you start off on a tight side, which I used to always start off at, and then I had some type of a failure, I'd go back to my sheet, check it, then know that that engine at that power would need a little bit more clearance, but never too much. If you put too much clearance into it, you're going to create all other kinds of problems, like oil contamination into the combustion chamber, which would also affect the tune.
Yeah, creates detonation and things like that by lowering the octane. So, for example, this engine gets put together, this ring gap, number 2 is at 22,000, this one came out at 22, this one came out at 21. All that's noted in the blueprint sheet. We run the engine at crazy power levels, and then all of a sudden this ring has a problem, it binds and breaks, cracks the ring lamb, whatever. We know by looking at the blueprint sheet that this one was fine, this one was fine, this one had a problem. We look at the blueprint sheet and we know why.
Yeah, we can check, let's say in the number 4 piston, we would check to see what was the ring gap in the number 4 piston. Now, obviously, and if the ring gap did bind, but obviously, if I have a proper ring gap, like let's say in this engine, they were all within a thou of each other anyway.
Right, and if for some strange reason this engine had a heating problem at one part of the engine and required us to run a larger ring gap or a larger piston to wall clearance, we would learn that very quickly because we have blueprints on every engine that's assembled and run and taken apart and analyzed with failures.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Simple enough. That's how you build engines. Obviously, I know these answers to these questions, but these people don't. So, we're trying to obviously help these guys out and give them a better understanding because a lot of people are telling them bad information.
No, education, the greatest amount of education comes from racing at high levels. Even a manufacturer does the same thing. You have to push an engine much further than you're going to operate it on a daily level. So, like my street engine in my Supra that I run at 800 to the tire, I run it like that every day. A lot of the technology that was used in the assembly of that engine was in this one. I know that engine will not fail because I've made 1800 horsepower with a relatively similar platform.
Right. Slightly different rods. Everything else is pretty much the same.
Correct. A lot of the clearances and tolerances in my street engine are similar to this. The street engine, just as an example, doesn't have aluminum rods in it, and it doesn't have the billet mains in it. Here's your billet steel mains. So it doesn't have that, but it has good rods. Actually, the same type of rods that we're using in the M3s. And it has studded mains, but with the factory main caps.
Very good.
If you look at this engine, it's very similar. This is actually a very similar engine to the M3 motor, the E46 engine. There's your oil squirters, inline 6, same number of mains. In this engine, you have your thrust washers and the number 4. I believe on the S54 they're in the number 6.
Right. Exactly. Well, there you have it. That's how you check these engines out. Anything else you want to add?
No, I can tell you this though. Somebody posted on the forums that they believe that the tuner and the engine builder should be on the same page. I would agree. And if people want to push these cars, they will brake. It's a part of pushing hard. Braking is a part of pushing hard. And maybe they should stick with a tuner and builder that are on the same page.
At the very least, the builder should give a spec sheet of how the engine's put together to the tuner so he can make decisions based on that information, at the very least.
Yes, it should. But a well-built engine will sustain the horsepower that it was meant to sustain. The tune should always be there. Absolutely. So if a customer came to me and said, I want an 800 horsepower engine, regardless of who that tuner was, he'll get an engine that can withstand 1,000 horsepower. And the proper tune is the proper tune. It won't fail the engine. Now, a bad tune can fail any engine, but it will show you in the signs. It will show you in the tops of the pistons, in the spark plugs, in the valves. It is blatantly obvious, but not necessarily in the ringlands, and it won't start there. That's one of the last things to go.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're obviously on the same page. We've had excellent luck with these things. so
Yeah, we've had a lot of success with these.
we keep going into the M3 stuff and have fun.
Very good.